Hey guys, welcome back to my podcast because you belong here. I am here with the sweetest Chelsea Staebel. Um, I don't think we've ever met in person, but Chelsea is friends with my sister Kelsey, and we've been friends on Facebook for a while. So I'm really excited that we actually talk. So
It's
thanks
like a real virtual friendship that's happening.
It's true.
2020.
It's crazy to be sitting here and talking and realizing that I don't think we've actually ever spoken to each other.
Yeah, it's odd, but I kind of dig it.
I love it.
Yeah.
So, you can tell everybody a little bit about yourself, Chelsea?
My name's Chelsea Staebel. My husband is Eric Staebel, and he is a worship leader. And I know that it seems weird to like introduce yourself by who your husband is, but like most people know him more than they know me. But I am like author, teacher, artist. So I've like taught classes and on the Bible, and I've written a book about like the Christmas nativity, and I don't know. That's kind of how recently I've been branding myself, but in reality, I feel like I'm a mom of 3 and I am just totally trudging through life, trying to figure it out and live with eternity in my focus. That is, you can like get into the whole branding and everything, but in reality, I feel like I am just my own version of Peter and Paul trudging through life.
I like that. For all of you people who are listening, Chelsea has this amazing book that's going to be coming out. Did I see in 30 days?
Yes.
Is that what it says on the website?
Available for pre-order now, but then I think you get your copies like the very beginning of November.
Okay.
Because it's for Christmas. So it's like, it'll be out this Christmas.
Yes.
Basically.
So I saw a sample and it is beautiful. So I will put the link to Chelsea's website in the show notes so that you guys can go there and look through all of her stuff. She has paintings that she does, and you can see kind of examples of those, some videos, and you can pre-order her book. So that's my little side note that I will put that in there so that you guys can support her as well, because it's going to be amazing.
Thanks, friend.
So I'm very excited.
I am too.
It's going to be
cool to see something that like you've been working on. It feels like you've given like it's here. It's this thing that I'm working on, and all of a sudden I'm like holding it in my hands, and that's crazy.
I love it. Yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Is there, so the whole purpose is to talk about testimonies. So what is a time or a season in your life when you have gone through something, or just a time where God has really just shown his love to you?
Yeah. So I was like thinking through this question, and I was talking it over with Eric, and I was having like a really hard time choosing one testimony, because I feel as if my life is just this string of things that God has done for me over and over and over again. And so you kind of have these I call them like your mountaintop moments and your valley moments, and you're just life ebbs and flows, and you're on the mountain and then you're in the valley, mountain valley. And I was like, do I choose a valley moment to share, or do I choose like a mountaintop moment? Do I go with victory, or do I go with like my bad stuff, because I think both testimonies are super powerful, because we have like my husband and I went through a miscarriage, and that was a really big valley for us. But then our son was born. But then 3 weeks after he was born, he went in for surgery, and like that was a valley, like mountain valley, right? And then he was okay. And then, immediately following that, right, then we ended up having another son. And then my husband, he has like a chronic disease. And so he started getting hospitalized a lot right after we had our second son. And then all of a sudden he breaks his hip, and like
Oh, I
That
forgot
was
about
just this
that.
like crazy season in our life. It was insane. But then fast forward a year after that, and we have like, it feels like the Red Cross is happening in our house, and we're making like 10,000 masks for the state of New Mexico, like in the middle of 2020, and rocking and rolling. And then fast forward a year after, we, like a year after that, all of a sudden now we're like getting prepared to leave New Mexico. I mean, it has just been this bizarre journey, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
And, it's been just a lot of ups and downs. And I was trying to think, in the midst of that, like we had a supernatural thing happen with our home, where we like bought our home for an insanely discounted price that only God could have done. And then we also were like gifted 3 different vehicles within that time. And so you have these like, yeah, that's insane. How many? When we were pregnant with my daughter, I told somebody, I said, I'm not buying a van because every time I have a baby, somebody gives me a car. And I was just being facetious. Like I was kind of being, just like ornery about it. And then I kid you not, the day we brought my daughter home, somebody showed up and gave us the keys to a car.
That's amazing.
Like only God is
Yeah.
going to put my mouth like that, So we've had these crazy, amazing moments and these crazy, like deep, dark valleys that we've gone through. And I was just really having trouble figuring out how to give God enough credit through all of that. Do you give him credit from the mountaintop? Do you give him credit through this, the valley of death? And I guess the biggest like defining moment so far has been when my husband did break his hip. I guess I would say, just because that was like his 3rd or 4th hospitalization that year. And so he had been going to the hospital for like 2 or 3 nights in a row and then coming back, and then 2 or 3 nights in a row coming back. And we just had, I had a 6-month-old and a 1.5-year-old son, these 2 sons. And I like had these babies, and their dad kept going into the hospital, in and out of the hospital. And it was, and then he broke his hip. And he broke it 3 hours away from us. So they had to, bring him in an ambulance back to Clovis. And he was in the hospital for a while. And then after that, I mean, he didn't really have mobility. We were pushing him around in a wheelchair at best, but really he wasn't moving. My youngest son wasn't sleeping through the night. And every time Eric had to get up in the middle of the night, like I had to get up with him, and then I was getting up. So I was just sleeping in these like 30-minute intervals a night. Like thank God for Red Bull and dry shampoo. That is what I lived on in that season. It was insane. And it did a number on our marriage for sure, like within that. So we were dealing with this, like literally his bones were broken and he had to have surgery on that. But our marriage was broken in the middle of it because he was dealing with just a lot of depression, and really questioning his calling and questioning his faith. And on the other hand, I wasn't. I was like, Jesus is with me. There's another in the fire. Like, we are here. I'm going to conquer, but I also was totally reclusive in all of that. And God taught me a lot of things, both about us and myself. I remember at the very end of that season, he was on crutches. And so he kind of started that healing process, to go back to normal mobility. And I had been gone on a trip. And I remember being on this trip and thinking, I don't want to go home. Like, I don't want to take my kids home. I don't want to go home to this person. And it was this totally shocking thought, because if you know Eric and I, you know that we are like deeply in love with one another. So I realized that if I could feel that way about him, anyone could feel that way about any of their, their spouse.
Mhm.
And I came home and we had this life-changing conversation, literally changed the trajectory of our marriage. Eric says it saved his life. I mean, it changed everything. And leading up to this conversation, I prayed my butt off is what happened. Like, I really prayed a lot because I wanted to make sure I was doing it in a way that was honoring to him, but also that didn't hold anything back, and we could really move through the next season and be like, get better, that we could get better. Because I realized our foundation was not good. The foundation of our marriage wasn't good. Can you hear the kids up there?
I love it.
They're having a great time.
The sound of fun boys at grandma's house, I'm sure, is amazing.
Oh yeah, it's pretty great. It's dinosaurs all the time right now. But following that was, that was 2019. So then 2020 happened and shook everybody up, and now everybody's home with their spouse. And Eric and I are actually having the time of our lives. Like, we were so close and we were on the mend so much, and our marriage is just going up and up and up from that place. But we hit like a weird rock bottom in that season, and God really, if I didn't have the Lord, I think I would have walked away, and I didn't, because I trusted the Holy Spirit that was inside him.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that changed our marriage. It changed our lives, changed how we act toward each other, and hopefully how our kids will act toward their spouse. I mean, it was transformative.
That's amazing.
Thanks.
There's so much to be said about those moments where you pray your butt off going into it. And like,
oh, for real. Cause you're like, am I a hypocrite? Like, am I going to say all these things? And I don't, yeah. Oh, it was not good. I mean, I prayed, I like sought counsel from people, but I was like, you have to love Eric, because like, I love him and I want things to be better. And I just really got after it with prayer and like, Lord, my heart will be broken. So I want this to work, and we need to talk, we need to have this conversation. Yeah. And it was good. So good.
I love that. So through all of that, what is a way that you got to know more truth about who God is? Like a characteristic of him, or something that you knew to be true, but something that became like fully tangibly evident to you through that.
Yeah. Hold on. I wrote some stuff down. That's right. Okay. Yeah, that season, I think, really hit home for me, like the power of prayer. And I know that sounds really generic and really cheesy. But prayer is what softened Eric's heart before that conversation. Mm-hmm. And prayer is what crafted the way I was going to say things. Yeah. And prayer is what sustained us even through like his broken bones. Like, prayer knit him back together, and prayer knit me back together in those moments. And I think too, there was this, almost like they talk about letting death into your home. I don't know if you've ever, like, people talk about like the supernatural, or don't let death into your home. And there was like a true presence of death inside of our home. Mm-hmm. And my spirit became so attuned to that I don't think I'll ever let that back into my life. Yeah. Simply because I recognized death for who he was. I was like, you are not in disguise anymore. I know who you are. I know what this feels like. And like, you're not allowed in my home anymore. Mm-hmm. And I always knew, like, your words, you have power in your words, like life and death is in the tongue. But there was one night, this is going to be kind of creepy, but there was one night that I got into bed next to Eric, and I felt like death tucked itself into bed with us. And it was this like bone chilling, cold, fear gripping sensation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't ever want to have that again. And it really hit home, like the reality that, one, Jesus conquered death. So he
Absolutely.
doesn't get to crawl into bed with me,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it almost like anthropomorphized death to this point where I felt like I could spiritually fight him,
Yeah.
and fight it to a point.
Mm-hmm.
And that was for me, like, yeah, that was a serious take home from that.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of people that death just slips underneath your door and you don't even realize it. And you are living out your lives with these thoughts that are like almost decaying your world, is kind of how it felt. I felt like our marriage was decaying and our parenting was decaying. And you almost don't realize it's happening to you until you wake up one night or one morning and, like, I don't know, they say, there's the fragrance of death.
Mm-hmm.
Like in the Bible, it talks about the fragrance of death. And that moment for me, I was like, oh my gosh, our house smells like death. Like, I just in the spiritual realm, like our house
Yeah.
smells that way. It's on my clothes. He's in my bed. Like, it was so violating that, God taught me how to fight through that, and how to, like, the valley of the shadow of death, how to walk through it. That God was truly like walking you through that season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there's so much to be said to like identifying that and knowing that. Like I always tell people, I feel like when you have experienced, like when you've had an encounter like that, when you have experienced something like that and learned how to get past it or like walked through it with the Lord,
Yeah.
you become so much more sensitive in your spirit because you recognized it. Like it's like all of a sudden your spirit is like, hey, you just empowered me and I can hear. I can
Yeah.
see, like you're seeing and you're hearing and you're smelling in your spirit. And like,
Yeah. Really. I was blind and now I'm not, and you have to get out.
yeah. Yeah. And there's so much to that because, like you said, it slips under people's doors and they don't ever know it. But when you have that power of the Holy Spirit and you allow your spirit to like, it's like you allow your spirit to have its identity
Yes.
instead of your flesh,
Yeah.
like, because as a kid, we encountered some things like it's a whole messy story, but, and now, like, ever since then, like, I am very sensitive. Like, my whole life, I've always been very spiritually sensitive to things like driving by something. I can say, like, there is something happening in that house.
Yeah.
It's just that sensitive. And I think it's because as a child, I encountered things that I shouldn't have had to encounter, but it has created this spiritual warrior within me that my dad helped, like my dad stepped into that. And then we just kind of moved into that together. And if I ever have a thing, it's like, hey, dad, we're fighting this. Let's fight this together, but just letting
Yeah.
your spirit be that sensitive to something gives your children that legacy to be sensitive without having to encounter it the way you did,
Yeah.
you know?
For sure. And I mean, it just it rises up that spirit inside of you. It rises you up. And a lot of Christians know enough to be good and they don't know enough to be powerful.
Oh, that's
We're all
good.
focused on being moral, and we forgot that we're powerful beyond that. You
Hmm.
know, like my Christianity isn't about being the good wife.
Yeah.
It's about being the powerful wife, the warrior wife. Like it's about being more than
Mm.
just moral, more than, you know, because, and morality, I mean, don't get me started, but morality is like, it's the currency of our world, right? There's good people
Right.
and bad people, and we love to like add points to the good people and take away points from the bad people, and we treat it like it's this currency, and that's fine. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in
Hmm.
changing the culture around me and changing the atmosphere around me. And that season of my life showed me how to do that. It gave me license to do that,
Yeah.
I think.
That's really good. I like
Thanks.
that. John Bevere has a book called Good or God, and I think it comes down like that. It's kind of similar. I haven't read the full book, but like he talks about something similar to that, where it's like good isn't necessarily God. Like it can be good and it can be godly, but it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that it is actually God moving on your behalf or you walking in what God is calling you to.
Yeah. Oh, and I think another huge takeaway for me in that season was I was doing like I was doing a lot of studying, and the song Another in the Fire came out right about the same time I was studying Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. And there was just this light bulb moment for me where I realized that as Christians, we're so focused on being comfortable. Like, our God is a God of plenty, and he wants you to be prosperous. And I'm not saying that he doesn't. And we, whatever, you can get into that kind of theology if you want to. But one, God is more concerned with your heart than he is with your wallet,
Yeah.
hands. And a lot of times, there's a lot of times in our life, we're waiting for God to split the seas for us. And we're actually in a furnace. And
Hmm.
there's red seas, and then there's furnaces in your life. So you've got this sort of play on water and this play on fire. And when you see water in the Bible, like, it's usually, and this isn't always the case, but it usually is an obstacle that somebody's having to overcome, right? Like the Red Sea, the Israelites had to go through it. Or, there's a couple of times where they cross over the Jordan River. It's this obstacle that you have to
Right.
go through, right? Jesus walks on top of the water in the middle of a storm. Or there's the raging storm in the sea, and Jesus is asleep in the bow of the boat. I mean, every time water and mayhem were these like closely linked ideas
Yeah.
within Judaism. And then you have fire, which we always link with hell for who knows what reason. And actually, a lot of times when you see fire in the Bible, it's this refining that's happening to people. And
Absolutely.
we get into these seasons in our life, and we're like, Lord, part the sea for me, walk on water, like allow me to reach over because God's going to make a way through, or he's going to make a way over. And God's like, whoa, I'm not going to do that, because you are in the middle of a fire, and we've got to be in it, because we're going to burn some things off of you, right? Or
Look at the
God,
truth.
yeah, like he refines us in fire, he prunes us in a garden, and none of those things are pleasant.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we're in a season where things are unpleasant, we ask for God to rescue us,
Hmm.
because we mistake fire and water all the time. And so I was in this season, and I'm like, Lord, have you forgotten me? Do you not see me? Like, look at me. I haven't slept. I mean, I need life support. Like, what are we, how is this happening to us? And it wasn't a sea that he needed to split for us. And it wasn't water we needed to walk over. It was literally something we need to go through
Yeah.
onto the other and it was refining and it was pruning. And if I had been removed from this struggle and this suffering, I wouldn't be half the person I was today. Our marriage wouldn't be anywhere near it is today. Like that season had to happen. And, I'm speaking from the middle of like another really refining season. So we're like a little bit homeless. But yeah, I'm like speaking from another really crazy season in our life. And I have learned to lean into that, to ask God, okay, I'm in it. What are you changing in me? Where are the rough edges that you can sand off? Like, how make me holy, because that's who I want to be.
Yeah.
Don't, but on the other hand, you have people who do need to be rescued from Satan, who are like, this is the Lord's test. You're like, it is not. You need to get out of there. Like, so I think the Holy Spirit, a lot of times we forget to ask the Holy Spirit to help us discern whether or not something is truly from the Lord or from Satan, because so often we call things from the Lord the devil's work.
Yeah.
And vice versa. And we get mistaken. And so we're either annoyed that God hasn't rescued us yet, when in reality, he's walking through it with us, or we don't even know to ask God to rescue us. And
yeah,
so learning how to discern between those two things, and then learning to lean in when you do have these seasons of suffering, that those were some huge takeaways for me from that time in my life.
That's really good. I don't think I've ever really like thought about the differences between the water and the fire.
Yeah, and they're not, I mean, it's not every case. Like, right, Jesus talks about hell as being like the burning and gnashing of teeth. So there's fire, and it's not like a full split down the middle, all the cases of fire and all the cases of water. But very often in the Bible, water is more chaotic and fire is refining, and we mix them up a lot in our life.
Yeah, I feel like so many times people just take that verse that says, be still and I will fight for you. And they just think like, oh, I'm just going to stand on that verse and I'm going to be still. When really, like you said, maybe in that moment, like you're supposed to be still, but not because he's fighting for you, but because he's fighting through you. Like he's changing those things and removing those things. And if you just stand there and wait for him to fight for you, you're not ever going to get to the other side of what he's trying to do in you.
Yeah, we so desperately want to be rescued out of anything that feels uncomfortable. And that's why we never change. That's why the church hasn't completed the Great Commission. Because if we're so focused on being comfortable instead of being powerful and changed and holy, then we'll be comfortable and people will go to hell.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, that's what's going to happen. And so in that time of my life, I thought, okay, I'm going to do the thing that's uncomfortable. And I'm going to lean in to the seasons that are hard, because I don't have my eyes focused on what's good for me in this moment. I have my eyes focused on how are we going to gain ground for the kingdom. And I'm not going to gain it as Chelsea 2.0. I got to be Chelsea 3.0, Chelsea 4.0. Like I need to be on the other side of I want people to be like, I want people in 4 years to go, we don't even recognize you anymore. Like you've changed so much. How many of us are sitting in church week after week after week, and it's 10 years down the road and your life doesn't look any different? Well, honey, you're not that close to Jesus that your life should not look different 10 years later.
Right.
I don't care what kind of church folk you are, you're not Jesus enough. So sit in a pew for 10 years, but like, let's do some stuff for Jesus. Oh, I get so frustrated. Like I get so, my like Holy Spirit gets rolling, but
yeah. Oh, that's
like,
so
I don't
good.
ever want people to be like, that's who, that's just who Chelsea is.
Yeah.
Hopefully I look more and more like Jesus.
I think that is the part that matters. Like I shared last week on my podcast, like listening to Amy Grant talk about being drowning with children and how her mother-in-law told her to just pray that, like, if you're exhausted and you're drowning and you're in that season where you just can't see straight because you're sleep deprived or you're going through something that's just blinding, and you just say, like, God, let something I do today have eternal significance. Nothing else matters. Like, and it shifts that focus, especially as a mom.
Yes.
Where you think, okay, my kids' grades don't matter that much. My kids' hearts are what matter. And the fact that their eternity matters, and like just shifting your focus to that, like eternity, changes everything about how you go through your day and how you get frustrated about the tiny things that are not going to matter tomorrow, much less in eternity.
Well, and I think all the time about the disciples, they're fishing and they're like pulling up empty nets, and Jesus is, comes and he tells them to fish on the other side of the boat, which is wrong. Like, that's not how you would do it. So already he's kind of doing something weird. And they're like, okay, bro, like, whatever, man, just, would you stop being a backseat fisher? And so they like cast their nets on the other side, right? Because I mean, you have to be honest, like, people get it. I get annoyed with Jesus reading the Bible because I wish he would just answer like a question,
right,
when they ask the question. So the disciples were frustrated with him. So they cast the net on the other side and they pull it up, and it's loaded with fish. And they pull it into their boat, and then their boat looks like it's gonna break, and they freak out.
Yeah.
And how many times do we pull in this overabundance of a blessing from God, and then we lose our business? Like, we just freak.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it looks like our boat is sinking.
Our boat is sinking. Our nets are breaking. This
and
carpenter person who knows nothing is telling me what to do, and he broke all my stuff.
Right here I am praying for an awesome marriage, and then when I'm actually pulling the thing into the boat that's gonna make my marriage good, like, I think I'm sinking.
Yeah.
And so how often are the things we're praying for things, and then when they land in our boat, we just start complaining about the boat and the water and the nets. And so I don't understand. I get so mad at myself, and I get so mad at other Christians. And I'm like, how are we don't have a boat breaking faith.
Yeah.
Like, the moment that blessing comes and God starts truly blessing us, it's so uncomfortable and so scary that we want empty nets again, because empty nets were predictable and empty nets were okay with us.
Yeah.
And just, Lord, help me not to be an empty net kind of person. Let me lean into the things, that you bring into my boat, and shoot, like, it might sink, but I can swim.
Right?
know?
Yeah. That's really good. Have you watched The Chosen?
I haven't. Everybody tells me Eric's watched it. Everybody tells me I need to watch it because I'm all
so
about
good. I cry every episode, and there is an episode there, like, it is that moment of the fish and the nets, and like, I was sitting there watching it with Nolan, and I'm like weeping because it was that, like, you could just feel it. Oh my gosh, it's so good.
Okay, I need to watch it. I like haven't watched TV in probably a year and a half. Like, I don't watch a whole lot of TV, and so I need to just. I told Eric I like the book better.
There's a devotional book, so you can just do it as like a small group, like where you go through.
That would be good. I could do that.
Yeah, so it's like, it's set up as a small group discussion. So you watch the episodes as like a small group video. And they're like, they talked with a rabbi, and they have like all this historical context on why they did the things they did, and like how they're telling this. Oh, it's so good. Anyways.
Okay.
So good.
I dig it. I like what they're doing. I mean, I know what they're doing. Like, I like it. I just haven't watched it.
It's fantastic. Watch it from a Bible study perspective, and you'll be like, yeah, I cry every episode. It's so good.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So through any of those times, or any of the other times really, has there been a scripture or a word or something that you've heard from the Lord that you would like to share, like a rhema word where it just came alive to you that you think would be encouraging for someone else?
Yeah. As far as scripture goes, I mean, I think, oh gosh, and now I'm gonna quote it wrong, and then that's gonna be really embarrassing. But I want to say it's like James 5:1, where it's the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective.
Mm.
Um, no, this is about rich people. Hold on. Righteous and effective. Let's figure it out. Because I would hate to say it wrong. But that's one that I've always stood on. Just because like we're made righteous through Christ, which means our prayers are powerful and effective. And I almost like that's like the pep talk that I give myself before I even start praying. I'm like, my prayers are powerful and effective. The prayers of a righteous person, powerful and effective. So
Good.
I'm not just sitting there and pouring my heart out to the Lord, just to be cathartic. Like I'm actually sitting there and pouring my heart out to the Lord because I'm interested in changing the things around me.
Mm-hmm.
And it really just changes my mindset. Okay, it's James 5:16. So I'm a number off. So James 5:16, prayer of a righteous person, powerful and effective.
That's so
Uh,
good.
yeah, that's when I prayed. I mean, I prayed for our home, and gosh, when I was praying for our son and his surgery, when I was praying for our home, when I was praying for Eric's healing, um, I told all of these. I remember when I got pregnant with our son, and I told all these people that I was going to have a 30-minute labor, and the room laughed at me. And I was like, get behind me, y'all, because that's what I'm praying for. And that's all I'm speaking into existence. And then people kept asking me if I wanted an epidural. And I was like, I don't know. I'm not going to have time to have one. And I get really like a dog with a bone when I'm praying for something. So I almost won't consider any other options, which can be really like bullheaded of me, but I call it faith. And so I was praying for that. And then lo and behold, I had like a 3-hour delivery, only pushed for 30 minutes. And I didn't have an epidural because they didn't have time to give me one. We were in the hospital for an hour and then we had our son. And I was like, the prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. I'm going to get what I prayed for.
Yeah.
Because I knew I didn't have the faith to pray for, a pain-free delivery, but I had the faith to pray for a fast one. So by the time we had my daughter, they wheeled me into the hospital, and one of the nurses goes, get this lady a room. She has her babies like crazy. It was wild.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
I'm gonna print that. I'm gonna make it like a pretty thing and I'm gonna print it. We have a prayer closet and we have like
okay.
sticky notes and I have the kids write their prayers and then we move them, like we kind of evaluate and then we'll move the sticky notes from one side to the other wall as they get answered to like evaluate, like to show
Yeah.
the kids that even if he's not answering them, like we're still believing for them, but he does answer prayers, kind of this whole conversation. So I'm gonna print that and like put it on the wall for the kids to see it.
Yeah. It's a great little that is my go-to. That is what I stand on. There's also my husband's go-to is gosh, I don't know the citation. This is really bad.
That's okay.
I don't know where these are. But it is humble yourself before the Lord, and at the proper time he'll exalt you. And we have had supernatural favor on our lives. I mean, we're only 30 and we really have had a lot of opportunities that other people would only dream of. And we've had those, I think, because we honestly just humble ourselves and we wait for God to raise our platform. I'm not seeking a platform. He's not seeking a platform because I don't ever want it to be about building my kingdom.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of like the verse that he lives on. So we, between the two of us, we're like constantly going back and forth between those. I think another principle that we live by is just keep your eyes on eternity. So if you can keep your eyes set on eternity, then you won't evaluate the things in your life the same way that somebody else might.
That's right.
Because heaven forbid you be a professed Christian and somebody who loves Jesus, and then your life doesn't look any different than anybody else's. If you love Jesus and you look the same as your neighbor who doesn't, then like, what's the point of loving Jesus?
Right.
Because he's obviously not changing you. And when you put your eyes on eternity, when you start thinking about things with this sort of eternal mindset, you don't get angry the same way. You hope in a different way. You're almost like more patient and more slow to move.
Yeah.
This season's really rocked us because we left a job. We left a home and friends and family that we built in a different state. We traveled cross country, and and now we're like trying to find a home, and we just found a job, and all of that looks really crazy. But we love Jesus and we have our eyes set on eternity. We know that God is constantly changing his kingdom, and where he's rearranging the people in his kingdom to transform the world, and we want to be a part of that. And sometimes being a part of that looks totally different and looks like you have no security. It looks like, it looks foolish to the world, and I'm really comfortable with looking foolish to the world as long as I know that I'm acting in faith on God's behalf.
Absolutely. That's so good. I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us. So good. I'm so glad that we did this. But I really, really appreciate it.
I had fun talking through all of that stuff. Feel like, I love talking about Jesus, so I could go on forever, but I had fun talking about it all.
Good. Hold on just a second.